Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... Y'all, I cannot believe December is already almost over. For real, it seems like yesterday was just December 1st, but here we are in the week of winter solstice. So, I would like to take this opportunity to go on and wish everyone a happy Yule, as well as an early happy Christmas and an early happy Kwanzaa. Now, in this episode, I'm reviewing the book Secret Santa by Andrew Shaffer, which I had received this as a present last year from my good online friend Brandy, and I really struggled hard not to read this out of the season because when I had read up on it, it seemed like it was going to be a really cool book. However, I was able to just focus on other things, but as soon as December came around, I jumped on this book and I loved it so much I read it in like 2 days. So Brandy, if you're watching this, I really love this present. Thank you so very much. I wish I could have read it sooner, and I hope you enjoy this review. Also, I would like to thank my good online friend Gina for buddy reading this with me, because not only did it give me a good opportunity to fanboy out with someone about the characters and the themes, but we had a good time discussing the nostalgia as well as what in the hell was going to happen next. So thank you, Gina, for reading this with me, and I know you're watching, so hi, Gina, and I hope you enjoy this review. Oh, God. Kerry, it smells like ass. What the hell?
Happy holidays.
Oh, thank you. Oh. Did you step in dog shit or something?
No, but I brought you the stocking.
Lift up your feet. We need to see... Well, no.
Yeah, I'm good.
Well... Oh my God! Oh! It's a stocking full of bowel movements!
It's a mystery shitter.
Oh! Well, if you've read Secret Santa, then you're already familiar with the phrase, it was a mystery shitter. Which I should have known better because not only am I reviewing the damn book, but it's near Christmas and it's Kerry. So, joke's on me. But anywho, without me wasting any more of your time, let's rewind to the 80s and see what type of supernatural horrors are terrorizing Lucy this holiday season. Secret Santa by Andrew Shaffer primarily takes place in New York during the 1980s, although its prologue opens up in Germany during 1945, and the epilogue concludes in 2019. Now, after we gain a glimpse of the horrors to come in the prologue, we fast forward to the 1980s where we meet Lucy, who has arrived at her job interview at Blackwood Patterson Publishing. However, once she meets with Xavier Blackwood, who is the head of the publishing house, he degrades her, then dismisses her. But as she gets ready to part ways, a happy accident causes her to trip and fall, where a doll known as a Perishin lands before her. And no sooner does this happen, Xavier has a heart attack, where Lucy tries to do everything within her power to save him. Come the following day, Lucy goes to the hospital to check on Xavier, but discovers that he's passed away. And while she's here, she bumps into his son Digby, who has now inherited the publishing house. Which, as they talk, he expresses that he knows nothing about publishing. And she explains that if he hires her, she can find him the next Stephen King. So, with nothing to lose, he hires her on the spot. Well, that next Monday, she begins her job as editor, and even though she started too late where she couldn't participate in the Secret Santa drawing, she attends the office Christmas party. And while she's here, she's surprised to learn that she has actually gained a Secret Santa. but everything becomes very horrifying when she opens up her present to discover someone has gifted her the very doll that she encountered on the day of Xavier's death. From here, Lucy is surrounded by a series of deadly events, and she slowly comes to the realization that she's not being hazed like how she first thought. Instead, she's being pursued by an ancient evil that has chosen her to be its next keeper. Now, all she has to do is to accept the position. The horrors of Secret Santa by Andrew Shaffer originate from a doll known as a Peristin. In European lore, the Peristin are followers of Frau Perkta, who is known as the Christmas witch of the Alpines, and like the story of Santa Claus, Frau Perkta presents gifts to good children. However, legend has it that she will disembowel misbehaving children and stuff them with rocks and straw. During December, to drive out evil spirits, Advent festivals were held where villagers dressed in Peristin costumes and marched the streets fighting against the less demonic-looking opponents. And in Austria, Peristinloft parades are still ongoing and are very similar to the more well-known Krampus runs. Fun facts! Here's a few things you might not know about Andrew Shaffer and Secret Santa. In an interview for Sci-Fi Now, Shaffer explained that Secret Santa was inspired by gremlins, ghoulies, and critters. Also, he altered the Peristin where he rooted it in pagan lore, then he combined it with the Eastern European Hausgeist. As Shaffer produced Secret Santa, he spent a great deal of time corresponding with his editor to balance the humor and horror elements, and he reasoned that horror and humor are two sides of the same coin. Setting-wise, Shaffer had always wanted to write a book set inside of a publishing house, but he never had the right story until Secret Santa. And due to the 80s being a huge decade for horror publishing, he felt like this period was to be an ideal timeline. Now that we have that covered, it's time to move on to the spoiler segment, which, if you haven't read this book before, I'm about to reveal some things that could ruin the experience for you. So if you would like to click away, I have provided a pinned comment in the comments section with the timestamp in it. Once you click on that timestamp, it will direct you away from the spoilers and bring you to the thoughts section. Now, you only have 17 seconds to do this. So, ready, set, go! Since everyone's had the opportunity to click away, I would like to talk about a few of my favorite moments. First off is the interview scene where Blackwood degrades Lucy because she had worked for a horror publisher, which, even though she had edited quite a few horror bestsellers and Blackwood is on a sinking ship, he still has the audacity to ridicule her taste in entertainment and call what she had produced as nothing more than tripe. Then, after he rips her a new one, he tells her to leave, and as she gets up to walk away, she trips and falls, but tries to steady herself by grabbing onto a bookcase, which this is when the box that contains the Peristin falls and lands at her feet. Then, after she's admiring the doll, she notes that it looks similar to a doll that her grandmother had, and its intent is to scare away evil spirits. Shortly thereafter, Blackwood starts screaming for his heart pills, and he begs Lucy not to leave him alone with the doll, which, of course, the doll does contribute to his death. As soon as we found out what the Peristin looked like, it reminded us of that creepy-ass doll that chased around Karen Black in Trilogy of Terror. And since both of us are huge fans of that movie, we became invested in this book 100% after gaining that description. Also, Gina and I really appreciated how Lucy stood her ground and defended her work in the horror genre. Like, every time Blackwood tried to cut her down, she had a comeback that was professional and legit. But what made this moment even so much sweeter is the whole time that Blackwood is degrading her and stuff like that, She knows that Blackwood Patterson is not above her, because before she goes into the interview, the book had noted that Blackwood Patterson wasn't her first choice. As a matter of fact, it wasn't even her 10th choice. Instead, she went to this interview because this place was nothing more than a last resort. So having that insight, it really made me feel like Lucy had been able to maintain the upper hand emotionally and mentally. My next favorite moment is when Lucy's co-workers attempt to perform a purification ritual on her because they believe she's a witch. And the reason why they think this is because in the past she had said a few harsh things that had come true without her intent. So, with their mindset, they chloroform her, and when she wakes up, she's bound by Christmas lights, and the leader of her abductors comes up and explains that they believe her familiar has been carrying out her dirty work, and to stop anything else from happening, they have to carve out her heart. Well, as Lucy tries to reason with them, she explains that if she was a witch, the person who stole her fruitcake would have choked to death because that's what she had hoped would have happened to the thief. Then, for argument's sake, Raven explains the only reason that didn't happen is because Lucy didn't know who stole her fruitcake. And since Lucy is bound where her powers are supposedly hindered, Raven feels smug enough to say she was the one who stole the fruitcake. However, no sooner do the words come out of her mouth, she starts magically regurgitating chewed fruitcake, and she dies right there. Which, this is completely impossible, because the fruitcake should have already been digested and probably out of her system by this point. I really love this moment because it made me doubt myself. And at first, I was like, there's no way Lucy's a witch. That is just too far-fetched. But then when I heard out her co-workers, I was like, I'll be damned. They're making sense. And the more I thought about it, I'm like, well, maybe if Lucy was born a witch and she doesn't know the extent that she is capable of, then perhaps she's saying these things and they are coming true against her intent. But when Raven started to choke on the fruitcake, I was like, no, Lucy isn't a witch. Someone is either trying to frame her or something is trying to swoon her by making her wishes come true. So because of the amount of mystery that this built, I really just fell in love with the whole idea of what the hell was going on and what was going to happen next. Also, I really love how this intense moment came out of nowhere, and because of how just in left field it was, it made me realize that anything could happen at any minute. My final favorite moment was everything that surrounded Lucy as she gave in to the Perishton. Like, at this point, she discovered from Agnes the reason why the Perishton had selected her is because she was rage-filled. Then, after something possessed Agnes where she gutted herself, Lucy returns to the Blackwood Patterson building for a final showdown, which this is when she actually sees the true form of the evil spirit attached to the doll. From here, she tries to bind the Perishton by returning it to its box, but after she does that, she hears Fabian screaming in the basement. So when she runs off to see what's up, she discovers that Digby had shot Fabian and tried to offer him up as a sacrifice. Well, with nothing left to lose, Lucy makes a deal with the Perishton to save Fabian. And after she does that, she goes to offer Digby up to the doll, which, after fate plays out to her favor, Lucy becomes the head of Blackwood Patterson. One of the things that I love about this moment was Digby actually thought he was in charge, but I think the Perishton was using him as nothing more than a pawn, just so he could go in and push Lucy over the edge into striking up a bargain. Also, Gina and I really loved how Lucy was cunning after she became the head of Blackwood Patterson, because instead of firing the workers who were going to sacrifice her, she actually decides to keep them on and explains that she needs them there for their hard work so they can make it as a team. Which, that might be true, but also she actually intends to use these same workers as sacrifices for the Perishton when it desires blood. So, yeah, I have to admit, I would probably do the same thing. Well, well, well. As far as skeezy bastards are concerned, the Blackwood men literally take the fruitcake. Now, Xavier is a great example of someone in the industry who thinks his shit doesn't stink, and God only knows why, because his publishing house doesn't have the best track record when it comes down to producing bestsellers. Also, had it not been for the Perishton, his wrinkled old ass probably would have been grass along shit creek long ago. Then, this old fart has the audacity to call Hara tripe and look down his nose at it when Hara has literally outsold what his house had been peddling. And you know what? It's a tale as old as time. Even today, snobs look down their nose on Hara, except when Hara makes a big buck. Then they want to strip it of what it really is and call it either suspense or drama. Aside from that asswipe, we have Xavier's son Digby. Now, at first, Gina and I liked Digby because we thought he was going to be Lucy's sidekick. Also, I could relate to a few of his issues, especially when it came down to his relationship with his dad. And I really thought, okay, all this poor, sweet, hot man needs is just a titty to lay his head on. And I was like, come on, Dig, come on, come on. Then, when his true colors came out, girl, I wanted nothing more than to toss him aside like a used pair of underwear. And I should have known he was going to pull a card like this because he never wanted to run a publishing house. Hell, the last time he read a book was when he was forced to. And I mean, my God, dude, I understand if you don't want to sit down and read a book, but at least listen to some audiobooks while you're snorting some blow or some shit. At least try to be a little cultured. But at the end of the day, all's well that ends well because he ended up as dead as a damn doornail and Lucy reigned supreme, so we all had a Merry Christmas. Secret Santa by Andrew Shaffer was a damn good Christmas horror novel that had the perfect amount of dark humor. And upon my read, not only did I fall in love with some pretty iconic characters, but I noticed some really cool foreshadowing and symbolism. Also, I noticed where there were quite a few themes going on, like the toxic workplace, the toxic patriarch, and how horror is snubbed even though it sells well. Character-wise, this book had a strong cast, which, among everyone, I really felt connected to Lucy because of what she went through in the workplace. Also, I really admired how she remained strong-willed all the way until she had no other choice. And even though Agnes had pointed out that Lucy was rage-filled, and I did see those elements, Lucy remained a very likable and human character. Also, she was a defender of horror literature, and she knew how to cook a homemade fruitcake, so what wasn't there to love about her? As far as foreshadowing is concerned, I really felt like the name of the publishing house that Lucy had worked for, which was Broken Angel, was a hint of things to come. And maybe this is just me grasping at straws, but when I heard the name Broken Angel, I considered that Lucy was going to be faced with some spiritual conflicts when she started Blackwood Patterson. Which, of course, she is faced with a sell your soul scenario, or as Gina put it, the Faustian bargain. Then we have the symbolism of the Blackwood Patterson building, where Gina and I felt like it represented everything that was vile. But at the same time, because of how the building and the spirit within it acts, I really saw where it represented a vampire, especially since the spirit is trying to swoon Lucy into using its powers. Now, some of the reasons why I feel like this book is vampiric: for one, Lucy has the same name as one of the characters in Bram Stoker's Dracula, even though her name is spelled differently. And similar to the Lucy character in Dracula, we do see where Lucy in Secret Santa does transform. Also, she refers to some of her co-workers as the Brides of Dracula, and her friend Fabian has written a new horror book about vampires, which she feels is the greatest thing he's ever written. But adding on to the soul-sucking effects of the Blackwood Patterson building, I was able to identify this as being a toxic workplace, which, because of what happens, we see where a person can easily become trapped in a job like this, even though they know it's not good for them or others, because they feel like this is a last resort and they have nothing better to go to. Then over time, there's the possibility that the individual can start to develop some of the toxic habits of that workplace. Another topic that this book touches on shows how a lot of publishers and people look down their nose on the horror genre, which a good example of this is not only by how Blackwood treated Lucy during their interview, but at the end of the book, there's a character who preaches that horror is dead and paranormal romance is in. Also, we have a scene where Fabian is having a book signing at a chain bookstore, and instead of them putting him out front, they tuck him away in the back like a dirty little secret. And while the horror genre has never been dead, but has simply been hidden away by bookstores that label it as literature or fantasy or thriller, I'm really happy to see that bookstores are now starting to grow a pair, and they're designating spots to the genre that proudly advertise it as being horror. Aside from that, we have the topic that regards the fall of the toxic patriarch, which I can't elaborate too much on there because of spoilers, but just know that the subject is there. And adding on to that topic, we see how power can corrupt an individual and how that corruption can create a repetitive cycle. Overall, the entirety of Secret Santa didn't scare me. However, there was actually one scene that pretty much was just pure nightmare fuel for me, and this was when we saw the actual form of the spirit that was attached to the Periston. Also, even though the book did creep me out, there wasn't anything in it that grossed me out. Secret Santa by Andrew Shaffer was a pleasant surprise that Gina and I absolutely loved. Like, it had a great balance of dark humor, mystery, and it was even a good throwback to old school horror. Also, as Gina and I were fanning out over everything, we really felt like this was paying homage to the book The Sentinel in regards to there being a bad place scenario in an urban setting, and we felt like it paid its respects to that creepy-ass doll that chased Karen Black around in Trilogy of Terror. So, at the end of the day, if you are looking for a thought-provoking, layered book that really gives a good example of horror publishing in the 80s while submersing the reader in Christmas festivities, then I do highly recommend Secret Santa. Well, now that it's time to close out my video, I would like to give a shout out to these amazing people for contributing to my Patreon. Here's a list of my Patreon contributors, and as you can see, some of them are creators, so be sure to check out their work. And if you would like to contribute to my Patreon, just go to the description section of this video and you'll see that I have a link available, where for $5 a month, I'll give you a shout out at the end of my videos like what you see here, and for $10 a month, I'll still give you that shout out, but I do creepy photography on the side, so at the beginning of every month, I'll send you over one of my creepy photos, which once you receive that, you can print it off, do whatever you like. And if you're able to contribute, that's awesome. If not, no sweat. I just hope you return to this channel so we can have a good time together. Aside from Patreon, if you would like to hunt me down on social media, links to my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok are all available in the description section of this episode. Also, if you've not subscribed to this channel, be sure to subscribe and click that notifications bell because I have more book reviews coming in the near future. So until we see each other again, I hope you have a great week and sweet nightmares.